Towering more than 29,000 feet above sea level, Mount Everest remains the highest mountain on Earth. Located in the Mahalingir Himal selection of the Himalayas, the mountain's summit straddles the border separating Tibet and Nepal. Mount Everest is home to many unsolved mysteries that have got people scratching their heads. Join us today as we tell you about the 15 most mysterious things that have happened on Mount Everest that are going to leave you speechless. Number 15. Maurice Wilson. Everest has attracted many fanatics, eccentrics, and colorful characters over the years, but none have been as out there as Englishman Maurice Wilson. In 1933, Wilson hatched a plan to fly into the northern slopes of Everest, crash land his plane, and then solo climb to the summit. He trained in Britain, hiking, and learned to fly a gypsy moth plane before spending the winter in Darjeeling, where he prepared for his climb by fasting and praying, which he believed would be enough to see him to the peak. Wilson wished to climb Everest as a platform to promote his belief that a combination of fasting and faith in God could solve the world's ills. Despite his lack of mountaineering or flying experience, he successfully flew from Britain to India, surreptitiously entering Tibet and climbing as high as 6,920 meters, 22,703 feet, on Everest. However, Wilson did not survive this attempt, and a British expedition found his body the following year. His last diary entry was made on May 30th, and his body was found dressed, it is claimed, in women's lingerie. Though this story was never corroborated, in 1960 a Chinese team found a woman's high-heeled shoe near where Wilson perished, and it was later discovered that he had, in fact, been a cross-dresser, having worked in a woman's clothing store in New Zealand before becoming possessed by the Everest mania that would ultimately lead to his demise. In 2003, Thomas Noy proposed that Wilson might have reached the summit of Everest and perished on his descent. But there is much skepticism that an inexperienced amateur like Wilson could have climbed to the mountain unassisted. Did Wilson reach the summit, and what force compelled him to go to Everest remains a mystery to this day. Number 14. The Yeti. The Yeti, once better known as the Abominable Snowman, is a mysterious bipedal creature said to live in the mountains of Asia. It sometimes leaves tracks in the snow, but is also said to dwell below the Himalayan snowline. Despite dozens of expeditions into the remote mountain regions of Russia, China, and Nepal, the existence of the Yeti remains unproven. The Yeti is said to be muscular, covered with dark grayish or reddish-brown hair, and weigh between 200 and 400 pounds. It is relatively short compared to North America's Bigfoot, averaging about 6 feet in height. Though this is the most common form, reported Yetis have come in various shapes. Many of the earliest recorded sightings of the Yeti derive from the Everest region, with the folklore of local Nepali and Tibetan tribes telling of a bipedal, hirsute, nocturnal creature living in their midst. In more recent times, various sightings, footprints, and even DNA evidence have gone a long way toward substantiating the claims of the region's storytellers. Notable examples include the enormous footprints found at 6,000 meters, 20,000 feet, by Eric Shipton's 1951 Everest expedition, and the Yeti scalp contained in Kumjung's monastery on Everest's south side. Arguably even more convincing are the findings of Joshua Gates and his Destination Truth team in 2009. The hair samples taken by Gates from a series of footprints measuring 33 centimeters long and 25 centimeters across were tested by a forensic analyst who concluded that the sample contained an altogether and hitherto unknown DNA sequence. Like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, there is a distinct lack of hard proof for the Yeti's existence. Though a few pieces of evidence have emerged over the years, the lack of hard evidence despite decades of searches doesn't deter true believers. The fact that these mysterious creatures haven't been found is not taken as evidence that they don't exist, but instead how rare, reclusive, and elusive they are. For now, the existence of the Yeti remains a mystery on the snowy grounds of Mount Everest. Number 13. Ghosts of Everest. Mount Everest is plagued with supernatural phenomena, ghost sightings, and other unexplained occurrences. Record-holding Sherpa Pemba Dorden has become renowned in the climbing world for two reasons. First is his claimed record speed ascent of Everest, 8 hours, 10 minutes, on May 21, 2004. Second are the events 3 days later, on May 24th, While approaching the summit from the South Col d'Orgy came across a group of deceased climbers whose bodies were frozen in the snow. Suddenly, he claims he was surrounded by something of the supernatural variety. In his own words, "When I paused at a mound of rocks, I saw some spirits in the form of black shadows coming towards me, stretching their hands and begging for something to eat. I think those were the spirits of the many mountaineers eliminated during and after their ascent of Mount Everest. The body of many of those who perished are still on the mountain, and one climber who passed from an accidental fall is still hanging from a rope. Many Sherpas believe the ghosts of Everest will not be appeased or leave the mountain until the bodies of the deceased are given a proper burial. With so many corpses stuck in the above 8,000 meters and more joining them each year and difficulty retrieving them, it's unlikely that the mountain will be ghost-free anytime soon." Number 12. Mallory and Irvine. When Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay successfully became the first to summit Everest in 1953, many viewed the triumph with a degree of skepticism. In 1924, two Englishmen, Everest addict George Mallory and his companion Sandy Irvine, were spotted through a telescope as tiny black specks clinging to Everest's towering northeast ridge, a mere 200 to 300 meters from the summit. Sadly, they never returned, leading to almost a century of speculation as to whether they actually were the first to reach the top of the world. By 1924, George Mallory, a highly accomplished climber, had already taken part in two expeditions to Everest. He first visited the Himalayas with the 1921 British Reconnaissance Expedition, organized by the Mount Everest Committee and led by Charles Howard Bury. This exploratory mission mapped the region around the mountain in detail for the first time. The team had two experienced mountaineers within their ranks, Alexander Kellis and Harold Rayburn, but Kellis died of a heart attack during the long trek in, and Rayburn fell ill and was forced to retire, making Mallory the expedition's de facto lead climber. In this capacity, he explored potential approach routes to the summit climb with a team of Sherpas. He was probably the first European to see the western CWM at the foot of the Lost Face, which his group established a path across the Rongbuk Glacier to the base of the North Face. In earlier attempts, Mallory had instinctively used oxygen bottles to assist in breathing in the thin air was somehow unsporting. On this third expedition, Mallory came to the idea that Everest would never be climbed without such artificial aid. After several attempts at climbing Everest, Mallory proposed making a final attempt with Irvine, who possessed good technical skills with oxygen bottles and was as strong as an ox to boot. Accompanied by 5 porters, Mallory and Irvine dashed up through the camps. The pair was guided by Odell, who was acting as their guide. Odell was out scanning the mountainside when he got caught up in snowfall. As the snow began to fall, he went outside and began calling for the men, hoping to guide them toward the camp, but he had to stay where he was until the snowfall subsided. He returned the next day with 2 porters and stayed overnight before continuing alone to Camp 6, where nothing had changed. Venturing further, he still found no signs of his missing comrades, arranging 2 sleeping bags into a T shape, which signaled to those below that no trace had been found. In 1999, when Conrad Anker's expedition to find Mallory's body ended in success, the Englishman's frozen remains bore no further clues. Most disappointingly, they found no sign of his camera, which they had hoped might end the debate once and for all. For those who believe Mallory and Irvine were the first to summit Everest, however, the greatest evidence to support their claim lies in something else that wasn't in Mallory's possession when Anker's team discovered him. Mallory had told his wife Ruth and his climbing party that he would place a picture of his wife there upon reaching the summit, which he had kept in his inside pocket throughout the expedition. When his body was discovered, the picture was missing. While this is not definite proof, there are chances Mallory and Irvine were the first to reach Everest. Number 11. The third person. The British explorer Frank Smith came close to becoming the first person to reach the peak of Mount Everest in 1933. His entire trekking group had turned around before reaching the peak because they were overcome by the mountain's sweeping wind, snow, ice, and low oxygen levels. Smith kept going, but he was never able to reach the peak. He was short by about 1,000 feet. Later in his diary, Smith detailed an event that has become known as the third man factor among scientists. He wrote about how, while climbing, he reached into his pocket, drew out a piece of Kendall mint cake, broke it in half, and turned around to offer the other half to a colleague. All the time I was climbing alone, I got a strong feeling that I was accompanied by a second person. The feeling was so strong that I completely eliminated all loneliness I might otherwise have felt. Similarly, Dougal Haston and Doug Scott, two British mountaineers, were forced to spend the night in the zone of the deceased after reaching the summit of Everest late in the day in September 1975. Not knowing if they would make it through the night, they constructed a snow cave and spent the night within. There wasn't enough air for everyone. Their condition was quite precarious, what with them being hungry and running out of butane to heat their shelter. Then something happened that no one can explain. Both climbers claimed to have sensed the third presence in the snow with them, one that not only provided crucial body heat, but also gave them tips on how to stay alive. The likeness of this presence have been described by numerous other Everest summiteers, including Peter Hillary, Lincoln Hall, and Reinhold Messner. Number 10. Uli Steck. Uli Steck, often known as the Swiss Machine, passed away in April 2017 while training for a historic attempt to reach the tops of both Everest by the West Ridge and the Lost in one go. Those who knew Steck well recognized that he was the Michael Jordan, Lionel Messi, Babe Ruth, or Usain Bolt of mountaineering. Hence, his grandiose idea was not considered overly bold or risky. Steck had set speed records on the north face of the Eiger and Annapurna's south face, and twice received the Pilote d'Or, mountaineering's equivalent of a Nobel Prize, for the first ascent on Tenkampochi and his solo speed ascent on Annapurna. Steck wasn't just quick, he was also technically adept, graceful, and at ease on most outrageously demanding of routes, making him one of the most accomplished mountaineers of his or any generation. So what led to this skilled climber's unfortunate demise? Steck's mishap occurred on the Western CWM, a section of the Canonical tourist route to the summit of Everest that he previously ascended. To a climber of Steck's caliber, the ascent should have been little more than a formality, and indeed a mere training exercise for his planned Everest Lost summit. And his climbing partner, Tenji Sherpa, later disclosed. The shock and disbelief felt by climbers worldwide upon news of Steck's death is a testament to his prowess as an athlete and the mountain's mysterious allure. Could he have fallen? Did the snow melt, or the ice gave it away? Was it an ailment brought on by the high altitude that finally took him? No one will ever know for sure what caused the mountaineering world's brightest star to lose his footing and fall more than 300 meters to his end. Steck was climbing alone, as he often did, because his climbing partners couldn't keep up with him, and the nearest witnesses to his fall were at then 1.6 kilometers away. What exactly happened remains a mystery, but the loss of such a bright star is one of the most unfortunate events to occur on Everest. Number 9. 1952 Russian expedition to Everest. In 1952, still before Hillary and Tenzing's famous ascent, a Russian expedition supposedly attempted to climb Everest by the north route in Tibet. News reports at the time even suggested that this optimistic bunch planned on mounting statues of Lenin and Stalin at the summit. The expedition made a final camp at around 8,000 meters, 26,200 feet, in preparation for a summit bid, but they subsequently disappeared without a trace. To further cloud matters, the Russians have always maintained that the 1952 expedition didn't take place at all, despite a report by Yevgeny Gippenreiter in the Alpine Journal later that year, stating that the 35 had set out to attempt the Northeast Ridge route. The USSR denied the attempt was made, and aside from sporadic newspaper accounts, no further record exists as to what happened to them. On April 21, 1952, the Sydney Morning Herald also speculated about the team's prospects on the mountain. Despite numerous attempts, no trace of the team's members or leaders' names have been found. Number 8. The Unknown Four. 4 bodies were discovered inside a tent at Camp 4 on May 22, 2017, and the news made its way to Everest Base Camp. The unfortunate mountaineers were found by a crew dispatched to the summit 3 days earlier to rescue the remains of a Slovakian mountaineer who had succumbed to altitude sickness. When it later transpired that none of the climbing agencies on the mountain were missing any climbers, or at least had none that were unaccounted for, confusion arose as to who the 4 climbers might have been. As news sources worldwide reported the tragedy, the Nepalese Tourism Ministry spoke out and revealed that they thought the bodies of those climbers from one of the previous year's expeditions, only for matters to be further complicated when it was discovered that none of these had reported any unaccounted for climbers either. The case remains open and is just another of the manifold mysteries to have befallen Earth's highest and most mysterious mountain. Number 7. The Rainbow Valley. Located on the northern slope of Mount Everest, Rainbow Valley is a little valley not far from the peak. Climbers who have attempted but failed to reach the summit of Mount Everest are buried in the Rainbow Valley. Everest's Rainbow Valley got its name from the brightly colored jackets that tourists and locals leave behind at the cemetery. Despite its bright and cheery name, this is one of the most horrifying places to exist on the mountain. Thousands of mountaineers attempt, and some successfully complete, the ascent every year. There aren't many people who admit defeat and head back to camp. And then there is the group that doesn't make it back from the mountain, and it becomes their resting place forever. It's unfortunate because their bodies remain in the snow, prevented by the cold temperature from decomposing. The more people perish, the more bodies pile up, leading to areas such as Mount Everest, Rainbow Valley to populate. Number 6. Bizarre disc-shaped UFO soaring above Mount Everest. Spooky footage analyzing a 2 billion pixel picture of the mountain identifying a black shape in the sky above the Himalayas was said to be an alien ship by many people. Skywatchers said it couldn't be a drone because of its height and the fact that it causes a silhouette. Eagle-eyed observers clocked the object after mountaineer and filmmaker David Breschers constructed a stunning 2 billion pixel photo of the mountain range. The image is one of 477 that have been stitched together to create a super high-definition mosaic composition. The completed picture captures incredible detail of the world's tallest mountain, stretching from the base camp where 500 climbers prepared to do the climb up to the sky above. The work was created in 2012, but appeared to have snapped more than the mountain range. Alien watchdog group UFO Today, who have analyzed the picture, said secret underground Area 51 type bases are rumored to exist around the photo's location. There has also been significant speculation about such bases around the virtually inaccessible Latko border area between India and China. Files that were declassified last year claimed that there have been 7 UFO sightings in the area since 1968. This is definitely exciting for people who are interested in alien and UFO sightings because it is said to be one. Number 5. Attack of Sherpas. Most people, when climbing Everest, expect to find the unexpected, and they even believe in looking up to heaven from the tall mountain. But a British climber, John Griffith, and his 2 companions encountered an angry mob of Sherpas, and they were forced to leave the mountain considering the unsafe circumstances. Speaking from Lukla, the town that acts as a gateway to the Everest region, John Griffith told The Guardian of the moment when a group of up to 100 Sherpas confronted them about an argument higher up on the mountain. It was obvious there would be no talking or negotiation, he said. They crested the ridge of the moraine above our tent. They had pulled their scarves over their faces and instantly bent down to pick up rocks. Griffith said that without the bravery of half a dozen climbers at Camp 2, he and his 2 partners would have been eliminated in the incident. He praised the American climber Melissa Arnott, the only woman to have climbed Everest 4 times, who warned them an attack was imminent. The attack occurred because Griffith and his companions had a heated argument with the Sherpas a few moments before, and they only thought of it as a verbal disagreement, but the Sherpas returned and brought an army with them. According to Griffith, there was a 50-minute period where they all thought they were going to get stoned to death. He kept saying he didn't understand what was happening. One of the climbers, named Simone, was injured, but he was able to survive. Griffith and his companions ran from the mountain because their safety was at risk, and if they stayed there for long, things could have gotten ugly. Number 4. Himalayan Goral. The Himalayan goral, or the gray goral, is a bovid species native to the Himalayas and found near Everest's ground forests. The Himalayan goral is 95 to 135 centimeters, 37 to 51 inches in length and weighs 35 to 42 kilograms. It has a gray or gray-brown coat with tan legs, lighter patches on its throat, and a single dark stripe along its spine. If Himalayan goral is examined closely, it looks like a mixture of deer, ram, and gazelle and is one of the unique animals found in the area. Himalayan goral often forms small bands of 4 to 12 individuals and can camouflage well within their environment, and that's why they are difficult to spot. It is one of the unique species found on Everest. Number 3. Marine fossils. While Lost and Nupst, both in the Himalayas, are also impressively high, Everest stands head and shoulders above them all. Around 200 million years ago, a big piece of land detached from Africa and was dragged by plate tectonics across what is now the Indian Ocean, giving rise to the Himalayan range. Near Asia, this landmass began pushing up the land ahead of it, creating a massive shallow ocean teeming with marine life. Limestone was produced from the fossilized remains of plants and animals that formerly lived in this shallow sea. Eventually, the Himalayas were formed when the landmass continued plowing north and colliding with Asia, draining the ocean and raising it up. The Indian subcontinent is the landmass in question, and it is still making land in its path rise as it moves northward. One of the main arguments in favor of plate tectonics, huge portion of the Earth's crust sliding over a molten rock in the Earth's core, was the discovery of limestone and ocean marine fossils at the peak of these mountains in 1915. This image was acquired by Landsat 7's Enhanced Thermatic Mapper Plus (ETM Plus) sensor on January 5, 2002. It is a natural color image, though it has been enhanced by including some near-infrared wavelength observations in the green channel to emphasize vegetation as well as being sharpened with the sensor's panchromatic band. While there is scientific proof of the marine fossils, some people credit this discovery to the biblical flood, as mentioned in chapters 6 to 9 in the book of Genesis in the Bible. Number 2. Growth of shrubs and grass. Shrubs and grasses are springing up around Mount Everest and across the Himalayas, one of the most rapidly heating regions of the planet. And this is making scientists worried about the future of the place. Scientists used satellite data to identify increases in vegetation in the inaccessible subnival, the highest zone allowing plant growth, ecosystem, made up of grasses and dwarf shrubs with seasonal snow. This ecosystem is known, but could play a crucial role in the region's hydrology, covering between 5 and 15 times the area of permanent glaciers and snow in the region. Studying images from 1993 to 2018 provided by NASA's Landsat satellites, researchers from Exeter University measured the spread of vegetation covered across 4 height brackets from 4,150 to 6,000 meters above sea level. The melting of Himalayan glaciers has doubled since the turn of the century, with more than a quarter of all ice lost over the last 4 decades. Research has suggested that its ecosystems are highly vulnerable to climate-induced shifts in vegetation, and this is one of the alarming situations with many risks associated with it. Number 1. The man who survived the scariest day on Everest and went back again. The critically acclaimed mountain climber and environmental geologist Jim Davidson was on the mountain's Camp 1 in 2015 when a 7.8 magnitude earthquake slammed into the Himalayas. It eliminated 18 people on the mountain and nearly 9,000 others across Nepal and in neighboring countries, and was marked as the worst single-day fatality count in Everest's history. Davidson was rescued by helicopter 11 days later when they went about rescuing others.
There might have been 2 avalanches. Can't tell.
Just a short time ago, I spoke with Jim Davidson. He's a climber from Fort Collins, Colorado. He survived the earthquake and the avalanche.
Davidson not only survived the incident 2 years later, he decided to return to the mountain and climb to the top. In the summer of 2016, after watching several friends summit and feeling like he was missing the party, Davidson decided he would definitely try Everest again the following year. He and Gloria sat down with the kids to tell them the news. To reduce his risk for the second Everest attempt, Davidson, then in his mid-50s, trained on average for 4 hours per day and sometimes as many as 12 hours, working out in the early mornings and late at night so he could still have time with his family. And for years, he had avoided other hobbies to allow him more time for training and family. Davidson achieved his long-held goal, and from atop Everest, he texted his wife, "I'm standing on the roof of the world."